so many new pieces to this IU football team.
To me, that's going to set the tone on how you get ready for games on Saturday in the fall.
I would put that Indiana room up against anybody else in the conference, and that's something that we typically don't even come close to saying.
If you want to get total sickos committee about it, there's a position battle at long snapper too.
This is the Hoosier Huddle Podcast, part of the College Huddle Podcast Network.
Good morning and welcome to the Hoosier Huddle Podcast. I'm Sammy Jacobs. Along with me is TJ Inman, and we're doing a double dip as we missed after the dust settled on Sunday due to travel schedules and just sheer exhaustion from my 20-hour trip to Pasadena. We're going to break down the UCLA game real quick and then get into Indiana's next game against the Charlotte 49ers to round out the non-conference schedule. That game will be at noon at Memorial Stadium and televised on the Big Ten Network. TJ, welcome in, and how are you doing?
Yeah, doing great. Obviously, it's a joyous time right now for Indiana football fans. I know something we're not used to is getting, you listen to national shows, read national writers, articles. Indiana's getting mentioned as a team to keep an eye on, and I think there's good reason for that after what the Hoosiers did in Pasadena.
Yeah, Indiana went out in open conference play at UCLA with a 42-13 win.
Yeah.
It was dominating, to say the least, and it was a good showing. So, what was your main takeaway from that game?
We both picked Indiana to win. I think we were both a little surprised. I can't speak for anybody else, but I was surprised at the comfort and ease in which Indiana handled their business. That game was 21-0, and Indiana never really let UCLA back into it.
No.
There was a moment, and perhaps what I felt was most important or most impressive. UCLA scores to end the first half, which Curt Cignetti, less than pleased with the defensive execution or intensity at the end of second quarters so far this year. So that's definitely something I'm sure they're keeping a focus on this week, is finishing halves strong. But UCLA scores, they get the ball back, down 21-7. A chance to get back into it, and you've got a targeting call on CJ West that gets him ejected. Fumble by Ethan Garbers. He couldn't catch the snap. And as both players are going for it, Ethan Garbers ducks down to recover the ball. CJ West also goes for the ball and hits him, gets ejected. D'Angelo Pons gets ejected. UCLA gets, I believe they got 45 yards of penalties on that drive.
That was the drive where it was Pons got ejected later in the fourth quarter. That was the Winnell Carr passing posture.
I'm sorry, you're right. Yes, yep. Winnell Carr gets a sack that it's called roughing the passer. We're not going to relitigate that. It's a
strike the passing pose.
Ridiculous call. But Indiana, not only do they not fall apart, which we have seen from Indiana in the past, not this team and not this coaching regime, but previous Indiana teams over and over, we have seen IU has a good stretch of play, a couple of negative things happen, and they completely fall apart.
It is exactly what UCLA did.
Yes.
Indiana goes down and scores first. UCLA on the first play of the game, the running back hits the ball with his elbow. It's a fumble, and CJ West jumps on it. All of a sudden, it's 14-0 IU. And that is how the last 3 years have gone for IU, is that, whenever there's you go into a game, you think you have a chance, and then all of a sudden, 7 minutes into the game, it's 14-0. and all hope is gone.
Right.
But yeah, back to that drive, they get down to get a field goal, cut it to
Right.
21-10. And Cignetti spoke to it after the game multiple times. IU responded every
Yes.
single time, went down, scored a touchdown, and that in my game rapid reaction was when I knew, hey, this thing is cooked. It's over.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the most impressive player, just individually, was Curtis Rourke. Complete command of the offense. He was spectacular. Rourke's numbers obviously really good. What stands out and what's been covered repeatedly is his play on third down, consistently delivering on third down for IU. The Hoosiers end up going 9 for 12 on third down in this game, while holding UCLA to 2 for 8 on third down. When you're able to extend drives, not just on third and short, he had an early play, 3rd and 16, converts that. IU goes down, ends up scoring a touchdown on that drive. It was repeatedly Curtis Rourke. He had good protection, so bravo to the offensive line there.
Running backs too.
The running backs as well, multiple times the running backs picked up blitzers, gave him extra time to step up in the pocket, deliver a clean throw. It's clear that Curtis Rourke feels comfortable in this offense, and that we saw that against Western Illinois, but really saw it here against a defense with some good athletes. He was able to find his receivers over and over. So Rourke played really well. I thought the receivers played really well. First time we've really seen Elijah Surratt let loose, and he made, nice catch after nice catch, just moving the chains for the Hoosiers. Not a lot of explosive plays on offense in terms of the passing game. Not a lot of, down the field 30, 40, 50-yard passes, but a lot of intermediate throws for 10 to 20 yards that Rourke was just delivering over and over. A very impressive performance from him. And on defense, I think you have to be impressed so far through 3 games with the level of physicality that this defense plays with. The tackling was not quite as good against UCLA as it was in the first 2 games, but some of that have to give credit to better athletes that Indiana was facing against UCLA than they were the first 2 weeks. So it's going to be a tad bit harder to tackle those guys, but still, Ethan Garbers was never able to get comfortable. He only throws for 137 yards, and really none of UCLA's receivers hurt Indiana at all. Rico Flores, who's a really good player, he was largely invisible in this game. Running back, they had a couple of nice runs, but again, just not a whole lot given up by this Indiana defense. I thought that they played a really good game. It was just a very solid, comprehensive performance from Indiana. And you're right. They're in that second half. As soon as IU responds to that field goal by UCLA, makes it 28-10, it was largely a stress-free experience the rest of that game. Indiana just, as Curt Cignetti said, this is a business trip for us where we're just going to go and kick somebody's butt. And that's what they did. They went and did it.
He said it at media days. He said, we're going to an old stadium to kick somebody's ass. And that's what they did. And the only stress in the second half was the terrible officiating and the even worse, just get rid of the ref analysis in the TV booth, because all they're going to do is back their guys.
Yes.
And all that stuff. So they bring nothing to the table. And then this guy goes on Twitter and attacks the IU fan base. It's like, get over yourself, dude. But yeah, CJ West, we'll move on to Charlotte. But the defense was, as Kirk Cignetti put it after the UCLA game, they played with the nastiness and an edge. And I think some of those penalties are a product of that, and I think you can live with it a little bit. But yeah, 12 penalties or 11 penalties, however many they had there. It's a little too many, even though if you take away the targeting and the ridiculous roughing the passer. It's still too many penalties, but overall, great performance at UCLA. You come home to play Charlotte. You might get CJ West back. There's rumors going around that they're going to rescind his suspension,
Yeah.
but you won't have D'Angelo Pons in the first half. So we'll see. We'll see if I use up by 30 points at halftime in this game. I don't play them.
Right.
If both sit out the first half, I just there's no reason to put it into the referee's hand in the second half with Maryland coming down the next week, and then that's a good way to build depth too at the corner and the defensive line. But let's get into Charlotte. They come in at 1-2. They had a come from behind win over Gardner Webb that saw their third string quarterback come in, lead them on 3 touchdown drives. I use a 28-point favorite. Is this another curb stomping?
Charlotte does have a better level of athlete than perhaps that 28-point spread suggests. Most analytic models that you're looking at actually have Charlotte as a pick in this game, not to win, but to cover that 28-point spread. For the most part, I'm seeing most of the analytic models and advanced statistics models have Indiana winning by something around 23, 24 points, suggesting that, maybe that line's a little bit inflated for the public based on what people have seen so far from Indiana. Inflating that line a little bit, given a lot of money comes in on Indiana to win after they see Indiana blow out UCLA on the road, coming off of a record-setting performance against Western Illinois. So I think that Charlotte does offer a little bit more of a challenge than that number suggests. However, what Charlotte appears to have a weakness in is pass defense. And health. That's true. Yeah, and those two go hand in hand perhaps. I mean, they gave up more than 340 yards passing to Gardner Webb last week. And to put that in a bit of context, Gardner Webb played James Madison. And that game was very low scoring. I believe 23 total points scored in that game, or it might have been 17. It was either 13-10 or 13-6 for James Madison. So Gardner Webb, not an offensive juggernaut, it would appear, and an FCS team.
This is a common opponent for people who haven't watched Charlotte football. Charlotte opened up against James Madison, so it is Gardner Webb is that common opponent between Charlotte or James Madison is the common opponent between
Right.
Charlotte and Gardner Webb.
Yeah. So not a lot of reason to believe that Charlotte can slow down Indiana's passing attack. If the Hoosiers are sharp, they should be able to put up quite a bit of points. Now, Charlotte's quarterback situation, you mentioned their third string quarterback. He came in and actually rescued them in that game, leading them on 3 touchdown drives. It is expected that Trexler Ivy, who is a junior, is going to be starting this game for Charlotte. Now, he started 11 games last year.
5 games last year and played in 11.
For the 49ers, he was splitting reps with Jalen Jones, who was a senior last year. Ivy started out the season as the third string quarterback. Max Brown has been hurt. And then Purdy, not related to the Brock Purdy, but a different one. He was pulled for what Biff Poggi kind of called a difficulty dealing with pressure. Gardner Webb was getting to him, which if Gardner Webb's overwhelming your offensive line, that's not a great sign going against IU. But they pulled him, put in Trexler Ivy. He leads them on 3 touchdown drives in the fourth quarter as they come back to win that game. I think that the biggest concern points for Charlotte will be their offensive line against IU's defensive line. Even without CJ West, if he's unable to go, Indiana has proven they can get pressure, whether it's through personnel or through scheme. They can get pressure. And then their second concern point will be inability to slow down Indiana's passing attack. The receivers that IU has are a lot better than what Charlotte has seen so far. They were competitive against North Carolina. So, I think it's important to consider this is not, Western Illinois. I think the Florida International is a decent comparison for what Charlotte has to offer. And if they were healthy, could have a little bit more to worry about. But if Indiana is sharp, you ask, is this another curb stomping? If Indiana is sharp, they should take care of business relatively comfortably.
Yeah, Charlotte coming in, I thought like third most transfers in the FBS. A lot of former Power 5 players. Looking at the schedule,
Yep.
You would say that Charlotte was the most dangerous non-conference team that IU plays on the schedule this year. But that just hasn't come to fruition. The Trexler Ivy does have it's not like your third string quarterback coming in with no experience.
Right.
He does have 11, 12 games of experience. He did turn the ball up through 10 interceptions last year. Did not throw any against Gardner Webb last week. So he's kind of matured and things that way. But yeah, if Indiana plays their game, they should be able to win. The place where Charlotte scares me and where upsets happen are on special teams. Indiana struggled with kickoffs last week at Alejandro Quintero. I think kicked the first two. One of them went out of bounds, and then Quinn Warren came in. They were short. Charlotte has a very good kick returner in Henry Rutledge. He's averaging over 30 yards a kick return. And that is something where, one, you expect IU to be kicking off a lot and scoring points. But to turn the game on its edge, that could be a point of contention. TJ, what is your matchup to watch?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you mentioned the two things that could make this game a little closer than what you would anticipate. Number one is going to be turnovers, and number two is going to be that special teams. So far, Indiana has not turned that ball over. So, that's if you can continue to win the turnover margin, you're in really good shape. Now, matchup to watch, I went with and I wrote my article here that was published yesterday. I went with third down. Indiana excelling so far on third down. Mentioned their numbers that they had against UCLA. So in third downs, and Sammy, I was just saying the matchup to watch. I wrote the article with third downs, and that's what we're going with for this matchup to watch here. Indiana really good against UCLA, but they've been good all season so far. 64.52%, so almost 65% conversion rate on third down for Indiana this season, and giving up only 25.71. So you're looking at almost 35-40% advantage on third down. That's massive. That's not going to continue all season. That's an unsustainably large number. But I do think that what Indiana is expecting to continue for the entirety of the season is an advantage on third down. It's not going to be 40 points, but it might be 20 percentage points. They have a lot of confidence in their offense on third down. The defense clearly is doing a good job of getting opponents into third and long and being able to overwhelm them with pressure. If you can get opponents into third and long, especially Charlotte, get after that quarterback, Trexler Ivy, you should be in good shape. So I think that it's a big advantage for the Hoosiers on third down. That's my matchup to watch there. A second one to look for, I think, is Indiana's secondary against Charlotte's wide receivers. Without D'Angelo Pons, that shuffles guys' responsibilities around a little bit. You're going to look at more playing time for Sedarius Doss. You're going to look at more playing time for Jamari Sharp. I would anticipate that Jameer Johnson would slide over into that number one corner role without Pons. So that kind of shifts things around for everybody. And Charlotte does have some guys that can hurt you. Number one on that list is going to be Jarius Mack. He's averaging 26.17 yards per catch. So he's a big play guy. They only get it to him a couple of times a game, but he can get deep. He can make some big plays. Sean Brown, another good senior wide receiver. Charlotte does use the tight end quite a bit, a lot of two tight end sets. Colin Weber is actually their top target on the season. He's got 14 receptions for 143 yards. He's a tight end that leads the team in receptions. So I think that it's a little bit different there. That Indiana's going to be, I think, running a lot of three linebacker sets. And we saw that some against UCLA, that IU went with three linebackers at times. A lot of times it was Isaiah Jones coming into the game, and he did a nice job on Saturday against the Bruins, as you had Fisher, Walker, and Jones on the field at the same time. I think you're going to see that some against Charlotte as well, because of the two tight end sets that Charlotte's going to run, and not having Pons, I think, puts you a little bit into that scenario as well. So I lean towards a little bit more three linebackers than what we saw from Indiana in the first 2 weeks. And that'll be a good test. A lot of Big Ten teams do run two tight end personnel. So Indiana's secondary going against Charlotte's dangerous wide receivers could be a good one. One way to negate dangerous wide receivers, of course, or concerns in the secondary, is to overwhelm that offensive line and get after the quarterback. You mentioned the 10 interceptions that Trexler Ivy threw a year ago. He can be forced into some mistakes. So I think that that's something the IU defense will be looking to do, is continue winning that turnover battle there. So,
yeah, well, I'll give you a break. I got them settled down. Another kind of unsustainable thing. IU is +6 in turnover margin, and I'm probably going to put the announcer jinx on it. They have not turned the ball over, and I think, if you do that and you convert on third down, you really make it a stress-free free game, no matter who you play. I mean, look, if you're playing Ohio State, you could play your A game and still get your butts kicked. But, against teams who you have more talent than, or who are matchup opponents, you protect the ball, take the ball away, and convert on third down and extend drives. You get games like last week against UCLA.
Yeah. Now, one thing that we'll kind of switch to a couple things we're hoping to see. I'd kind of like to see Donovan McCulley get into the action and get into a bit of a rhythm. I think that Indiana's offense might not be able to reach its ceiling without Donovan McCulley being a part of it.
I think he was on a snap count last week.
Yes, yeah, and that's perfectly fine. Obviously they haven't needed him yet. The offense has been prolific, and Donovan McCulley has been entirely absent. He did have at least one target.
Same with EJ Williams. Both of them, if you look, and he was not on the injury report last week. I couldn't see him on the sideline. I thought I saw him on TV, but it also could have been JMF.
Yeah.
But those two at the end of last year were really, really good, and you haven't seen either of them for more than a dozen plays.
Right. Yeah. So I getting McCulley and EJ Williams, into some kind of game rhythm prior to Maryland, I think that would be advantageous for Indiana's offense. And then the other thing that I'm hopeful to see, it would not be a terrible thing if we had to see a field goal kicker take an actual field goal. That's,
Yes, one from longer than 40 yards, which I thought last week
yeah,
there was a time they went for it on fourth down that would
yes,
have been about a 50-yarder that I don't know because that might be McCormick's, and since he's hurt, it's kind of
right,
out of the range.
right.
But it's also that's like no man's land, especially on grass and
Yep.
outdoors stuff like that. So yeah, you want to win by a lot. You want to say, okay, let's stop
Never
the
beat the
drive
kicker.
here
Yeah,
and kick
yep,
a long field goal just to see because I said that against FIU, but just to see what your range is for Radicic and maybe McCormick because McCormick has a big leg and maybe
yep.
McCormick just to see what happens in some of these closer games as the season goes on.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And then Maryland next week, given the history of that series, that could definitely be one that comes down to a kick,
Always outside of last year and maybe another year, that's been a one-score game.
Yep. Yep. And that, Maryland went to Virginia, won comfortably. They appear to be a handful. So that's going to be a fun one as well. So that's kind of, and then as previously mentioned, just a reshuffled secondary without D'Angelo Pons, who steps up and is able to make some plays until Pons is back in the lineup. So we'll switch to predictions here. For me, again, I'm looking at those advanced analytics models. I'm knowing Indiana's traveling back from California. Does that matter at all? They've had a full week, so I kind of don't factor that in. Indiana's had a week of hearing from everybody how great they look, and they're a big favorite against Charlotte. Is there any complacency that sets in prior to a game against Maryland? This is sort of the definition of a trap game where you got Maryland on deck right after UCLA. Is there any slippage or complacency in what you see? I just don't think IU is going to be quite as sharp on Saturday, and I do think that Charlotte has some talent. I don't think that this is a team devoid of options. I think Indiana wins comfortably, but I do not think that they quite cover. I'm going to go with Indiana putting up a good performance, but a little bit sloppy, perhaps. I'm going to go 41. So I do think we see a couple of field goals. Indiana 41, Charlotte 17. 41-17.
That was going to be my pick too, 41-17.
Sure
I
to be
also
wrong.
I think that if IU comes out to a big lead, you're going to see them pull their starters off the field pretty quickly to get them ready for the rest of the season
Good
and
point.
the rest of the Big Ten, and not put it into injuries' hands and not put it into the referees' hands.
Yep, that's a good point. Yeah. I'm no expert on the ad reads, but a reminder, everybody, on game day, head over to Upstairs Pub in Bloomington on Kirkwood. They've got a lot of promotions going on, good partnership with us. We certainly appreciate that. There's been a lot of positive feedback from people that have been there for the game day atmosphere. Good food, good drinks, and good time with fellow Hoosier fans for those that do not make it into Memorial Stadium, or for those that are going to the game and want to head over there for breakfast or brunch before you head over to Memorial Stadium and your tailgate. So big shout out to Upstairs Pub. Hoosier Huddle will have continued coverage of the Charlotte 49ers, all the preview content. We've got matchup to watch. We've got a lot of player features, excellent staff of writers this year. So make sure you check out that information and content. We'll have the game day primer up on Friday, and then game day Saturday at noon, Big Ten Network and the IU Radio Network. Following that will be after the dust settles sometime on Sunday. And then we turn our attention to what we hope is a 4-0 Hoosiers team hosting Maryland the next Saturday, which also a noon game. So we'll know. Indiana will have a shot to be ranked if some carnage happens at the bottom of the top 25 and Indiana takes care of business against Charlotte. Probably not going to happen. They do have a ways to climb. But if they take care of business against Charlotte and then beat Maryland, the more important thing is IU will be one win away from bowl eligibility. Hoosier Huddle will have all of it for you. We thank everybody for listening to us. Give us a follow on social media. I'm super bad at all that stuff, but you guys know what you're doing by this point.
Yep, HoosierHuddle.com, and I apologize for the cranky baby. He has a cold. HoosierHuddle.com, at Hoosier_Huddle on X and Twitter. Find us on Facebook, YouTube as well. And again, the Upstairs Pub Breakfast Club starts at 7 a.m. First 200 people get T-shirts and breakfast, and lots of beer deals. We'll have it in the game day primer. TJ, thanks for carrying us home across the goal line. We'll be back next week to preview IU Maryland.
Have a good week, everybody.